You do have it mentioned in the 17th century that people would eat cocoa, and they would, like the maidens back in the Americas would eat it, apparently, according to the sources. But they didn't develop a taste for it back then because the cocoa processing technologies that would later to be developed hadn't yet come about. So cocoa itself at that point was really kind of quite a bitter, quite a gritty experience. So they liked to mix it with cream and eggs and sugar. Whereas you go forward in time to the 19th century, and by the 1840s, Terry's are manufacturing all kinds of chocolate confectionery, and it was dark chocolate back then. And they had these wonderful chocolate creams that they would make that were really popular, fruit creams, as well, kind of more sugary confections. And Terry's experimented a lot with different kind of fillings for chocolates throughout that period. Rowntree's also experimented with solid chocolate in the 19th century, but it's not really until the end of the 19th century we start to get really successful, lovely dark chocolates and milk chocolate coming in as well. We have a really exciting tin of Rowntree's cocoa. Now, it might look like the most drab thing in this cupboard, with everything in this display case is super bright and exciting, but this tin is really exciting because it went with Ernest Shackleton to the Antarctic, and it came back. It's a full tin of Rowntree's cocoa. We haven't opened it, so there'll still be cocoa inside that possibly might still be drinkable, but nobody would want to. I wouldn't recommend it. But it was part of the unused supplies that remained on the ship, which is why it made its way back. And it's written on the label that it was from his expedition, and we were donated it from his family, so we have a clear line, we know where this came from. We also have a super exciting chocolate apple. Now, the chocolate apple was something that Terry's developed in 1932. Now, nowadays we have chocolate orange, they're really popular. But the chocolate apple was a little dessert kind of treat that you bring out to your friends after your dinner, and you use the tap and unwrap that they have in the commercial still nowadays, I think. So you'd tap and unwrap your chocolate apple, and it would be in segments ready to divide among your guests. And this was really posh at the time. Milk chocolate itself was really posh, really it was expensive. This is middle class people would be buying this. And it was kind of an aspirational thing to have. Now, a little bit later on, Terry's developed the chocolate orange, and the big difference between them is the chocolate apple was not apple flavoured, but the chocolate orange was orange flavoured, and the chocolate orange is the one that survived, I think, because it's just such a novelty and it's still such a nice taste as well. We have a couple of the oldest Easter eggs that we've heard of, actually, in our museum collection. Two of them are on display in this case. They're both by Terry's, and they both date from around the 1920s to the 1930s. And the 1920s egg, which has this lovely purple wrapper around it, we were given it by Terry's, who they had sold it, but then they received it back with a note to say that the little boy that it was bought for had sadly passed away. So they had it back. We sadly don't know much more than that about the story. It's a very sad Easter egg, but it does mean that we have an incredibly well-preserved 1920s Easter egg in its original packaging. And it's quite posh as well. Easter eggs in that period were extremely expensive, especially compared to nowadays, where you can get them for just a few pounds. You were talking shillings back then to buy them.